Hello, friends. Bienvenidos. My name is Jen, aka Jen Colo on social media, your local witchy friend and intuitive guide through the occult. As always, my lovely husband and co host is David, aka Premier Pulls on social media.
Hi, everyone. On today's episode, Jen explains the butterfly effect.
Welcome to the show. Grab a chair, make yourself at home. Jen's got stories to share, you'll never feel alone.
So, we had great discussion on our community discussion post for La Manda.
I know, it was interesting. Not that I hated that episode, but I think it wasn't. I mean, personally, if I'm going to be a critic of our podcast, I don't think that was our strongest episode. We were still rushing because we were behind the week. So we were like, we got to catch up. And we were still rushing when we recorded it. But I ended up getting a lot of positive feedback on that one. It just kind of goes to show, like, sometimes the thing you don't, like, care about the most is some of the better work. So, not that we don't care about every episode, but, I mean, we can't hit, like, perfect every time. And I didn't think that was our best one, personally.
I think maybe what made up for it was the fact that we had like cultural ties to it, so we could talk about it deeply.
That's true. Yeah. And I got some more feedback from it, and just on a personal note, and it's just such a vague topic that I think, which is funny because I thought it was very niche, but I think there's like more components to it. So, no, I don't think I would do a part 2, but it was, yeah, you weren't really an expert in it. I kind of knew about it more like on the surface. So I don't know. I feel like we didn't have a lot to offer, but yeah, we got really good reception on this one. So we did get some community discussion post from Mazi at Ms. Mazi not MissMazi.com, at Miss Mazi. My mom had a
I think she meant to say Manda.
My mom had a manda with La Virgencita de Guadalupe, which is the Virgin Mary, because I was a handful in my youth. I think you still are a handful, but hopefully not as much. She's a really good friend of ours, so she won't mind. We had to go to take her roses at her altar in Mexico City, or Mexico DF, which is the capital. She kept it light, no bloody knees. Yeah, and that's also some of the feedback I received, right? It wasn't always like a complete sacrifice. Even our example last time, it was just like candles and just a small offering. I did, however, get a little more details about the miracles. So I mentioned them last time, where the lady told my grandma, like, hey, if you buy a miracle. And I wasn't sure what that was, but I got a little more clarification. Basically, I guess I wasn't too far off, but you can go into stores or like botanicas or spiritual stores in Mexico and buy miracles. And what you do is, like, for example, if somebody has an ailment with like a knee or a leg or something, they buy the miracle specific for that body part, and then they like place it on the body part. So I think it comes as maybe like a scroll or a prayer, something like that. But it is a tangible thing, and they just call them milagros, which is miracle. So, yeah.
That's interesting.
If you haven't met your deductible on your insurance, that's a way to go. The next comment we got was from Crystal Ann over at Waxy Aesthetics. Firstly, thank you guys for shouting us out. Yes, of course. Thank you so much for all the services you provided. We really appreciate it. Great work. If you need anything in the waxing or facial or self-care department in your Merced, check them out. They do a really good job. But I've never heard of La Manda before this episode, so I really had a lot to learn. I've never really practiced it either, but I do try to be mindful of when I ask for something spiritually and physically, that I do something either for someone else or a kind gesture. I've always related that to karma, but La Manda and karma kind of have similarities, but I try to keep the scoreboard even. Also, I really liked your guys' stories, and this episode was a good one. Yeah, I definitely see the parallels. I think with karma, though, I like your approach. You're like, I'm trying to be a good person and keep like, forward. Yes, and keep the cosmic universe in balance. Whereas like the manda can almost be greedy, I think. Like, I get it. It's at a times of desperation, but it's definitely a quid pro quo. I think with karma, you're not necessarily like looking to get something out of it. You're just like, I'm going to be a good person, So like nothing bad comes my way. Whereas like with La Manda, it's very like specific, very intentional. What do you think?
Transactional.
Yes.
Like with La Manda, you're paying your bill.
Basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And with Karma, it's like
Paying
like
it forward.
Paying it forward, or like a savings account. You're just kind of throwing it in there, and then you'll reap what you sow, kind of deal. But that's awesome. Really cool to hear that that's kind of how you live your life, paying it forward. I think that's always a good message, especially if you can. I know I saw an article this morning that was like, millennials and Gen Z are splurging, and the splurge was groceries.
You know what's fucking dystopian is like now you can Klarna or like whatever other apps let you like pay in 4 payments your groceries.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I did not know that.
Yes, they're starting to offer that now. Or like when I look through my bank account and my statements, like for anything over $50, it gives me the option like pay in 4.
Damn.
Yeah.
That is wild. The biggest realization we've had in this household, and it'll give you a little insight into our eating habits, is we used to go to McDonald's, not really because it was like our favorite, but it was just so cheap and quick. But now McDonald's is expensive. The thing we're most shocked about is I think we wanted some hash browns the other day, and it was like $7 for 2 hash browns. And it's like, oh my gosh, those used to be like 99 cents. So 2 things. One, probably a little better that we're not eating there. But also, like, it's causing the same, it costs the same amount to go to McDonald's as it does to like a local restaurant. So,
It's cheaper to go to a local restaurant and get like ethnic food, like Viet, for example, or like Thai used to be a treat. Now it's cheaper than McDonald's.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
And it's
weird.
like I went to McDonald's because I was too broke for Thai food, and now it's the other way around. Well, I don't really want McDonald's anymore, but yeah, it's like I always wanted the Thai food. It was just out of my grasp sometimes.
Yeah, so, and we got a little bit off topic now. I'm really craving some Thai food. But yeah, I think, paying it forward if you can is definitely a good thing. So, especially where we are now. Go ahead.
So getting into the butterfly effect, this episode or the butterfly effect as a concept is more like, I guess, philosophical than like spiritual, but I feel like it could have spiritual components to it. And I've had a butterfly effect on my life. So I was just really excited for this episode. But what is the butterfly effect? It is the idea that small events can have a large, unpredictable influence on the future.
Okay. Where does the idea come from? Like what? So it's called the butterfly effect. From what I understand, it's like the flap of a butterfly wing can have, a massive effect, right?
Yeah, I've heard like different iterations, like does the flap of a butterfly's wing in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas or a typhoon in Europe? But the idea came from a meteorologist and mathematician named Edward Lorenz in the 1960s. He was working with different computer modules to predict the weather, and he found that small rounding differences in like numbers and variables caused significant changes in the results. So that's where
Interesting.
he like started proposing this, and then different people started like hypothesizing, and they were like, yeah, that makes sense, or no, that doesn't. And even to this day, like it's still highly contested. But I personally do believe in the butterfly effect.
So it's the idea is like it's non-consequential things lead to very different outcomes, right? And if like this one thing didn't happen, this other big thing would have never happened.
Yeah.
Is the basic idea of it.
Yeah, basically, like it's like exponential growth. Not to be a math nerd, but like
Well, it's funny because that's what I was gonna say, right? It's exponents are so fascinating because even like once you start getting to the 10th power, the 11th, it becomes almost incomprehensible. Like we have the idea of infinity, but to me, even like exponents are way more fascinating than infinity because infinity is just never ending, right? Which, yes, of course, obviously that's like the largest amount we can't quantify it, but we can theorize it. But as far as exponents, like the numbers get so big that it's almost unquantifiable, right? we couldn't write it down. That's why there are exponents. And so it kind of makes sense when you think about it. Like 5 to the 10th and 5 to like the 20th is a huge difference. So when we're talking about the butterfly effect, it makes sense that like in this case, one integer could make a whole difference. But on a cosmic level, yeah, that's kind of freaky to think about.
Yeah, it is versus like 5 to the second, 25. Like we can conceive what 25 is.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
But the like 5 to the 25th is like, I don't even think you could write that. Like if you were going to write it by one by one, I think we're talking millions or probably billions, which
Yeah.
is crazy. Yeah, because like you said, 5 to the second, the difference between 5 to the second and 5 to the 20th is just, I mean, you had just 1 0, right, to that too. Inconceivable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I do think that, yeah, I agree. Like if this like little gust from a butterfly wing, like, hits just the right angle where it's not like destroyed by a tree or by a hillside, like if it has basically a direct shot to Texas, like, yeah, that I personally am a believer that that could happen. Absolutely. It's sort of like all the conditions have to be right, but it's not impossible. And that's why like butterfly effects are just so amazing to like look back at. And like when I look at my life I'll share my butterfly effect a little later into this episode, but like I'm like, wow, my life would have been so different if it wasn't for this like small insignificant choice in a split second.
100%. Yeah. So a couple things on this one. I think this is usually you do explain, but I do have kind of my thoughts on this particular subject. So of course, I think at this point I might just have to make it a part of the podcast, but I have my pop culture reference. So throughout my life, I've had 3 favorite movies. So at one point I had a favorite movie, at another point I had another one, and right now I have a current favorite movie. I've only had 3 favorite. For those who are wondering, my 3 favorite movies at a certain point in time have been The Matrix. Right now it's The Dark Knight. But at one point, my favorite movie of all time was The Butterfly Effect with Ashton Kutcher. It wasn't a huge success. I don't know if anybody's actually seen it, but I watched it. I remember I watched it at like sleepover. So I was either in like probably high school or middle school. And it was so cool. The concept was basically this dude could like go back in time and he would like try to fix his problems. And then every time he went and tried to change something, it would cause like a dramatically different effect and down the line. And basically the moral of the story was like, you just can't you can't change fate, right? Like, so he would change something, but then somebody would die, or he would go back and like save the person who died, but then like his life was like shit, or like when he went back and then like, because he did that, he never met like the love of his life. So that was like the concept. There were some sequels, but they really sucked. The movie itself, I've seen it like way after. It holds up. It's okay, but for whatever reason, I was really fascinated by it. Anyways, that's just like my little pop culture plug. However, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it reminds me of like when people ask the question, like, if you could go back and like tell yourself to do this one thing, like 99% of the time, I would not risk it.
Well, it changes the outcome, right?
Exactly.
I mean, you can't really predict it. So like, what if, it's so hard to say, right? Because we come from a point of privilege. So it's like, would I want to change my life? Probably not.
Yeah.
But there's 8 billion people in this world. There's people who are like, I'll take any other hand except this one. So
yeah, no, I agree.
It's hard to say like, yeah, I think you and I probably wouldn't, but like you couldn't blame somebody from having that thought.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just talking about like
general.
Me specifically.
Oh,
like
yeah.
I can't speak for you, but for me specifically, I would not.
Correct. Okay, so here's where my like spiciness comes in. I think the butterfly effect is a direct correlation with the idea of like free will. Now, there's a psychologist, B.F. Skinner, who proposed that we actually don't have free will. And I've always kind of subscribed to the idea that like, I think it's a nice concept to think that we have free will and we have the ability to decide our fate and our future. However, I do think there is a possibility in this world where things have already been dictated for us and have already been set out for us to happen. And so if you take that in conjunction with the butterfly effect, those things may seem nonsensical. However, they could already just be part of the plan. I don't think there's a master plan or like an intelligent design. I do just think though that like from the moment of the Big Bang till now, however that happened, that's just a path that it's taking. And like we're carbon life forms. The idea that we have the ability to control or change the will of the universe is a little grandiose to me. I don't know. What do you think? Is that too far-fetched?
I feel like we have limited free will. Like there are factors bigger than us that we cannot control. Like for example, I will never be a billionaire because I was born in America and I was not born a white male from like a wealthy background. Like I will never be a billionaire. No matter how hard I tried, no matter like if I take the right steps, there are just forces bigger than me. And then in astrology, there's also, I feel like, limited free will because you're born under a specific set of circumstances and like certain programming. And then with the eclipses, like there, or even any transits, like your life will be affected in a certain way. And then that like really limits your choices. Like your choices are not infinite. Like I feel like with astrology, your choices are limited. And then you're like, given the conditions, what can I do? Sort of similar with my tarot readings. I feel like I present the conditions that are like in front of you, but you don't have like unlimited possibilities, options. Yeah.
I think, yeah, I mean, I appreciate your spiritual and cosmic approach. I think that's always your approach. I think mine on a like neurological level, reality is the synapses that fire in our brain, right? That's, you can agree with it. You can't, you can say there's something else, but on a scientific level, everything we experience, everything we sense is an electrical impulse in our brain. So to me, it's like, if you see it like that, and again, we've spoken about this in the past, the mind has a way to defend itself, right? If you've been through trauma, sometimes your mind will forget that trauma. If you have, if you don't understand something, the brain wants to fill in the blanks. We're very uncomfortable with the unknown. And I think that's for survival, right? That goes back to like, we don't know what's in the bush. It could be a tiger. It could be a predator. We need to like figure out a way to like conceptualize what's there for our safety. So I think that goes back to our evolution. I almost think that free will is a defense mechanism of that, right? The brain can't comprehend, oh my gosh, I don't have control over my world. I don't have any control over it, right? I think all the factors outside of our just self influence who we are. And that's the classic debate in psychology. Is it nature or nurture? We've kind of found that it's a little bit of both, but it's like we're a floating rock in space, right? We don't have that many factors that can determine different outcomes. With the wave of technology coming, we have more information, but I mean, there's not too much control. So like going back to the butterfly effect, one little thing I think can make a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know.
And it's scary. I mean, it's scary to think like you don't have control over it, but like there's also a little of beauty in that and saying like things are the way they are and I can try my hardest, but it's kind of I know, it's scary.
That kind of pushes us into like the question of, is time linear? Because there are like schools of thoughts that like past, present, and future are happening all at the same time. Our brain is just like understanding. I cannot wrap my head around that. And like my little electrified hamburger meat in my brain is like, nah, time is linear. And that's just what I'm going to stick to until I find a better way to understand it. And that's why I also believe in the butterfly effect, just because like it is a linear consequence.
And I mean, time is also perceptive, right? Like we understand the concept of time by quantifying measures of like units, but it's also something that we've developed as humans. So like, I don't know, when you start thinking of like how old galaxies are, how old planets can be, solar systems, like time is also just an interesting construct. So damn, we're getting deep in this one, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
Okay, so I see here in the notes you have some pop culture butterfly effects.
Yeah, I know that there are a lot of historical butterfly effects, but honestly, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Like, it's a little too politics and like it's a little too spicy for this podcast. I know we talk about capitalism a lot, but like the historical butterfly effects have to do with people. So yeah, I'm not touching that. But there is an interesting pop culture butterfly effect that I was able to find that someone laid out on Reddit, and I think the logic checks out. Without Biden, there would be no Fall Out Boy.
Explain.
So Fall Out Boy, for those of you that don't know, is a band that was like bigger probably in like the 2000s and 2010s, but the bassist, his name is Pete Wentz. His parents met while working on Biden's Senate campaign back in the 70s. So if Biden wasn't running for Senate, there's a chance that his parents may not have met back on the campaign trail and he wouldn't exist. And yeah, there would be no Fall Out Boy, which is very interesting.
That would be a sad day. Yeah, that's a good one. There are some other fun pop culture ones. If you have any that you know, share them in our community post. But yeah, butterfly effect, super interesting. I did not know about the meteorologist though, but that makes total sense. I like that. I like conceptualizing numbers and things of that nature. And yeah, I think, like I said, exponents are such a great example to see how like one integer can make a huge difference. So, all right, examples. I'm sure if I really sat here and thought about, you could say technically everything is a butterfly effect because you could go back to like, well, if my parents hadn't met, then I wouldn't be here. But then if their parents hadn't met, so at some point there does need to be a cutoff line. It's funny because I just spent the better half of the last 20 minutes saying that we don't have free will, but I also do think like you control your destiny. I know it's super like opposites and probably even hypocritical. I think that free will, it's more of a philosophical thought of like, this is the thought experiment of like, do we or don't we have free will? And I think there's good evidence to suggest that we maybe don't. However, with that said, like, you could say it's my Sagittarius or my Leo that like, if I want something, I kind of just go for it, right? Like, I don't think I've necessarily been influenced by anything or there's been any moment that has led to something else. I'm sure there has been, and I would have to take a deep dive into my life. The only thing I would just say is like, for the most part, everything I've like set out to do, I've done. From high school, I knew I wanted to go to college. I knew I wanted to graduate. There hasn't been too many curveballs in my life. And again, I'm very fortunate, right? I don't think a lot of people can say that, to say like, I haven't had, any major issues or any major curveballs. Like, I've kind of set my life up to where I want it. Obviously there's things you could always do better, want better. So that's also humans, right? Want. But yeah, it's I don't picture my life turning out any other way than it is at the current moment, which again, very fortunate thing to say. So I don't have any examples. Maybe for the next episode when we go over the post, if I think of some, I will share those. But what do you have?
So, a small or what I thought was inconsequential choice in my junior year affected me getting a full ride scholarship, and eventually not being in student loan debt and being to where I am today. So it was like a back to school thing where we had like a specific day we had to come from this time to this time, and we had to check into all 8 stations, and one was like registration, the other one was like picking up your books, the other one was like taking your picture, stuff like that.
This was in high school?
This was in high school when I was a junior in high school. And you had to go through stops 1 through 8, and the time I happened to go, the line was really long for station 1, and I don't know, I was kind of a little shit, and I was like, no, I'm not waiting in that line. Like, I do what I want. Just because I was valedictorian and I could get away with it, like, I would cut class. Anyway, I would cut class to do homework for another class. It was
Literally rebel without a cause.
literally. Anyway, I was like, I'm not doing this. So I decided to go out of order and I went to station 7. I don't know why, but I just did. And then I happened to get in line behind a senior who was the senior class valedictorian. And then I was junior in the running to become valedictorian. And we were just talking in line, killing time. And he told me that he happened to find a full ride scholarship at Cal State Long Beach that was only open to valedictorian. So even just to get the application, you had to be a valedictorian. And then it was valedictorian versus valedictorian, where like grades didn't matter. It was your personal statement and your writing. And he was like, yeah, I don't know, I randomly found it. Like, I've never heard of this program. And I was like, wow, I wouldn't have known about it if it wasn't for you. And then he was like, I don't think I'm gonna apply. I'll probably like apply to UCLA instead. For like technical reasons, I had to get a scholarship that was outside of FAFSA. Like, I didn't qualify for FAFSA, so I had to get something private. So when it was my senior year, I remembered that and I was like, okay, this is a private full ride scholarship. Let me try this. When I applied, they said pick your high school, and they had like a whole list. And I went to like through the list, I want to say like 3 times, and I did not see my high school. And I was like, what's going on? So I called them and I was like, am I disqualified because my high school is not on this list? And they were like, we did not know your high school existed because we've never had an applicant from there. So we wouldn't, like, that's why we've never done outreach at your school. That's why, like, you've never heard of us and we've never heard of you. But let me add your high school in the list so you can apply. So they went on the back end. They added my high school. I applied and I got it.
Yeah, so they would never even have known of you.
Yeah.
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 And that was such a pivotal moment in your life. I mean, like you said, I think it kind of put you down the trajectory you are now. I mean, some would even say like we probably wouldn't even have met had you not done that. But yeah, that I think that is a perfect example of the butterfly effect, right? Such an inconsequential decision of like, let me just cut the line, led to, yeah. I mean,
it's like I could have gone to station 5. I could have gone to station 6. Like,
yeah.
I would have never. I could have stayed in station 1. Like, I would have never known about this scholarship.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. Yeah, you know. But I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, what if it's just the universe? It's like, yeah, it's so trippy to think. This is one of those like really like philosophical episodes where we're rattling the gray matter for sure.
So I tried going back and like looking at the astrology of that time. I can't remember the exact date.
Yeah.
But I feel
Probably
like
would have been summer, right?
yeah, it would have been summer, and I know like the month and the year, and I feel like any of the big forces would have been the slow moving planets, maybe Jupiter or Saturn or something. So as long as you have the month, you'd probably be fine to like guesstimate. And even if it was transiting somewhere where I would have had luck in like school and career, that still just gives you a window of opportunity. It's like on you to seize the perfect conditions. It's sort of like when rockets have to wait for the perfect conditions to like shoot off.
Yeah.
That's basically astrology. It's like it gives you a window and then it's on you to like move forward and seize it. If you look at the tarot card, the 4 of Cups, the original like
Artwork.
the original artwork from the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, you'll see that that's basically like what that is. There's a guy sitting down and he has 3 cups in front of him, and then like a cloud with a hand is handing him a 4th cup, but he's like not looking at it, and it's like, take this cup. Like the universe is literally giving this thing to you. So yeah, I feel like even with like, for example, astrology, like you have the perfect conditions, but you still have to act on it.
Well, what's that saying? Like, all luck is the intersection of preparedness and opportunity.
Exactly.
And I like that. It's Yeah, I mean, I think that's what it is for sure. Yeah, I think that is a wonderful butterfly effect. And yeah, it is so inconsequential, right? Like, I mean, it's almost fascinating that you remember it because like, you could have as easily forgotten, like, wait, why did I apply or why did I take advantage? But it had such a tremendous impact. That's a really good one. Now I'm kind of jealous. I definitely need to find one for next week.
So we talked about this off the air, but I'll just bring it back now. I feel like us meeting was a butterfly effect because your friend swiped on me. You didn't swipe on me. You could have been like, no, I'm not giving you my phone, but you did,
I
right?
agree. Yeah, and I think like we were talking off air, it's like to me the butterfly effect really is more the degrees of separation. In your case, it was like got out of line, applied. That college wouldn't have known it. So there's like degrees of separation to it. I think I think anything can be a butterfly effect, but it's like, yeah, what if my phone was dead? What if like, there are a lot of what ifs, but if it's also just like one choice leading to one outcome, I don't necessarily think that's a butterfly effect. But obviously you can break it down into like, different sections. But, I almost would argue more that like you going to Long Beach, I don't know if you and I would have met if so that's probably more.
not.
But
Yeah.
either way, super pivotal moment in your life.
Yeah, I definitely would not be the person I am today without going to Cal State Long Beach. I feel like if I went to any other school, like UCLA, USC, I got into like all those top state schools.
You know what's really interesting though? For you, it sounds like it was a very pivotal moment as far as like Long Beach was more than just education for you. It sounds like for me, I feel like my college that I ended up choosing was so inconsequential. I mean, I feel like I would have been in the same place had I went to San Francisco State, but I got into Chico, Humboldt, and Sonoma. I honestly think if I would have gone to any of those three, like my outcome still kind of would have been the same. Maybe not Humboldt because that shit was far. So I think I would have struggled with that a little bit more. But yeah, it's just interesting like how for you, it was such a determinant piece of your life. And then like for me, college or university was a little more inconsequential. So awesome. Great example. We're going to cut in a little bit of an examples. A, because I didn't have one. And then B, because we had some fascinating questions. Our questions this week come from Joshua at Joshua Lomi. Lamoy. I don't know if he's submitted before. Has he?
I think he asked one on the moon episode.
Oh my gosh, but he went all in today and it is a thinker. So we're going to try to knock these out as best we can. Joshua, thank you so much. Obviously, you have some sort of tie with the butterfly effect, so I cannot wait to see your discussion post on this episode. But
he's just hella philosophical.
I love it. Do you view time as linear timeline, or do you view time as a linear timeline, or do you view it as a fluid and always ever changing? If fluid, then how could the butterfly effect have impact on the outcomes of events as it's always ever changing? So the way I see it is the universe is space-time fabric, right? So if you look at the universe, it's like a giant, let's say, blanket, right? Everything in the universe weighs it down. So like if you have like a giant blanket and you put like a baseball, that like it's going to create a cone shape, right? So time, right? Time has to flow to that. So if the baseball's pushing down lower, then the 2 points of contact are going to be closer. So time, I think, can be fluid. And again, this is on a cosmic level, so it's not physical, right? We can't observe these things physically, time and space fabric. So I would say fluid. Yes, I think time can be viewed more fluid than linear, just because, like you said, what did Einstein say? Like relativity is important, right? So you and I may perceive an hour a lot differently, and there's something to be said to that, right? Because in an hour, 60 minutes are passing. Whether you're doing something or I'm doing something, those 60 minutes go by. How we interpret them can be so different. So I think because of that, there is some fluidity with time. I don't know if we've discovered like what makes those changes or those nuances, because obviously the 60 minutes are hard fact. But I do think that they are fluid. As far as the effect of the butterfly effect on that specifically, yeah, I think, if, again, going back to our example of we're experiencing the same hour, but let's say something happens to you within that hour, that could totally change your perception of time, right? So every little aspect can change the fluidity of it. I hope I explained myself.
Yeah, I'm still like more linear in my limited understanding. I'm open to new like concepts and to changing my opinion, but as of now, like I can't wrap my head around time being fluid. Maybe our like perception of time is fluid, but time itself I think is pretty standard.
Correct, but why would we perceive it, right? Why would we have the capacity to perceive something if there's like no effect on it, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. And it's hard because if you take one step back philosophically, there is no universal truths, right? I can describe the color red to you, and I can probably say with certainty we're seeing the same thing, but I will never know exactly what the color red looks like through your eyes.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think time is the same way, right? We can perceive it, we can measure it. It's kind of like gravity, but I think there is fluidity to it. And that's different than time travel. So I think that's where people may be caught up. Like,
I think so.
the idea of linear is like past, present, future. But I think you're absolutely right. We technically are never, ever going to experience an exact present.
Oh yeah, because our brain is processing.
Yes. So that's the other
past,
thing.
yeah.
Like, we have never as humans experienced the present, which is also scary to think about. So I hope that answers the questions. Kind of a vague answer, but that's kind of how I see it.
But then he has a follow-up question. If time is predetermined, would the butterfly effect be governed by the Nova effect or delayed factor of Murphy's Law? So the Nova effect is...
I will say you threw me for a curveball. I do fancy myself as somebody who knows. I know Murphy's Law. I did not know what the Nova effect was, so I did have to look that up. It's my understanding that it's a perception of like loss of enjoyment after like success or good luck. Is that?
Yeah, it's used to describe the increasing decline in happiness in a person's life after experiencing good luck or like a pleasurable event. Yeah. And then Murphy's Law is what can go wrong will go wrong.
Yeah. So I don't know if time is related to these two issues. I mean, obviously we're not a scientific podcast, so there may be more to it. I just don't see the relationship. Go ahead.
But there is a relationship because the Nova effect is like you're gonna feel happy now, but you won't feel happy later. Versus like Murphy's delayed factor of Murphy's Law is it won't go wrong right now, but it'll go wrong eventually. Is the question.
Got it. Okay.
So I feel like college, going back to my butterfly effect, college going wrong for me, absolute worst case scenario would have been me taking out student loans and then never graduating. That would have been like everything that can go wrong will go wrong right there.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And that's not going to happen because you can't take my education away from me. Yeah. And I wouldn't get student loans now for a past event. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So therefore, I don't think that the delayed factor of Murphy's Law like makes sense. But I think that the Nova effect does because it's like, yeah, you can't ride that high forever. Eventually, it doesn't mean you're going to be like depressed and miserable, but yeah, you're just not going to be as happy as you were during like the pivotal effect. Like when I found out that I was getting that scholarship, like when I got my big thick ass packet in the mail, I was fucking ecstatic. But it's like maybe a month from them, I was still happy, but I wasn't as like hyped as when I had that packet in my hand, you know?
Correct. Yeah. So as far as like the Nova effect, it also goes back to the psychology of like the serotonin and the dopamine, right? That's why shopping addiction exists. Basically, that's why every addiction exists. It's the dopamine hit. So I think when something good happens to you or something fortunate happens to you, it can't hold forever, right? A famous study they did was they were able to predict how a child was going to be down in life as far as success if they were able to be better with the delayed gratification. Meaning, if a child can identify, hey, if I put a little sacrifice now, I will have like a better reward down the future, right? So that's what we strive for, is not understanding, but being okay with delayed gratification. So the Nova effect, I think is directly correlated to that, right? There's nothing that's going to make us happy forever. So that's why I think as you grow older, that intrinsic value holds so much more weight, right? Because speaking of time, you start understanding your time on this earth is finite, right? Your time with the people you love is limited. The time that you have to do the things that you want to do is shortened. As we grow and responsibilities grow, it's wild that we have 8 hours dedicated, in some cases more, 8 hours of your day, right? 8 hours of your living is dedicated to something just to get by to your means. And so there's never going to be something that's gratuitous forever. So I don't know if that's related too much to time, but I mean, that's just kind of my approach. And then the delayed factor of Murphy's Law, right? What is the worst thing that can happen to a human is death. And we're all heading there. So it's like everybody essentially could hit that final Murphy's Law of like, you're just no longer here. So, all right, there's a lot more. We're running out of time, and so I do want to get through these. So
I do want to say one last thing about the Nova effect. There is basically, when people describe it, it's like you're happy now, but you're going to be depressed later. I feel like that all comes down to you as a person, and that's why it's important to practice like mindfulness and gratitude. Correct. Because it's like, yeah, I was hyped 2 months ago, but I'm not going to let that get me be depressed or like always chase that high. Like, yes, I'm content with the events in the past. Anyway.
Yeah, completely agree. If karma is designed to have the outcomes of your own past life as well, would that affect the outcome of the butterfly, given that you are already changing some things you already did before? Not stepping on the butterfly effect, but still witnessing the hurricane. Yes, I think if you believe in the concept of karma and reincarnation, yeah, the scoreboard doesn't end, right? It's probably infinite. And yeah, I personally don't believe in reincarnation. I think that's it. We just have one life and make the best of it. However, if I did, I do think that like past things could affect us. Kind of like in Avatar, The Last Airbender. Aang has the knowledge of all the avatars before him, and he can, solve the problems, whatever, based on that. So yeah, I think if that's something you subscribe to, I think it would make sense that all the previous things do have effects.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like there is like a karmic aspect and like a past life aspect to your birth chart. If you look at the nodes of fate, people say that the south node represents like your past life and basically like skills that you're born mastering because you mastered them in a past life, versus like the north node could also represent like what you were lacking in a past life, so you want to achieve it now. So I guess like if karma, or if past lives and karma were a thing, then technically I guess like the events of your past life 100% would affect when you're born, in order to like put your nodes exactly where they need to be, and also like for you to be born with a specific birth chart, because like I said, the rising sign changes like every, I want to say, between 60 to 80 minutes. So it's like, yeah, I guess that could be like a butterfly effect.
100%. And we are going to go over a little bit of this episode. I don't want to rush this because these are really good questions and conversations we're having. So I do want to add to that. So that's the cosmic part of it. That you can look at, but there have been studies that link, if your, I think it was grandpa or great grandpa smoked, their decision to smoke somehow affected your genetic makeup and can have consequences to your generation. So I mean, we're not even talking about like karma or past lives. We're talking about like your literal genetic ancestors. Their decisions have a direct effect on your health now. And those studies have been done.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. There's like the cosmic part of it, but there's also the scientific part of it.
Yeah, no, that's true.
All right. Last question. Great question. So time and space itself is always in a simultaneously state of being. Do you think that both A and B of the butterfly effect is something like Schrodinger's cat, where both outcomes could have a 50-50 chance of both happening depending on each outcome, given that it's still a possible outcome later down the line of possibilities? All right, so Schrodinger's cat is a thought experiment. basically stating that if I put a cat in a box with poison, like a poisonous gas, if I don't open the box, there's a state in which two realities can be true. The cat is alive or the cat is dead. But the verification is not going to happen until you open that box. So two things could technically be true. You won't know until you open the box. I don't necessarily think the butterfly effect applies to that specific example, just because, again, Schrodinger's cat is a thought experiment. So it's a little hard to quantify like thought experiments with like real things. But if you look at the butterfly effect, it's like what led to you putting that cat in the box, right? So was that predetermined? Was that something that was going to happen no matter what? And then the experiment itself is just the thought of like two things can be simultaneous at once. So I think the butterfly effect would affect the main thing that you're doing, and the outcome is not really dependent on the butterfly effect. It's dependent on like the original trigger. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I don't know if this is necessarily answering your question, but the way that I processed this question and this wording is like, again, just going back to college because that was my butterfly effect. As I was a college student, my future was both college graduate and not college graduate. Like both things could still happen in the future. And I don't know until the end comes. I feel like, yes, both outcomes could live simultaneously up to a certain point of no return.
Yep.
Me graduating is a point of no return.
And the butterfly effect in your case was getting to college, right? And then once the outcome is determined, then that's what the butterfly effect caused, right? So it's kind of like, what is the determining factor?
Yeah, my first semester, I was actually like in danger of being expelled.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, the butterfly effect got me to college, but it didn't help me stay in college.
Exactly.
Well, luckily I did not get expelled. So yeah.
Awesome. Great questions, Joshua. Thank you so much. These were wonderful questions. It got my brain thinking. This is what I love. So keep them coming. All right, we're just going to wrap up with some housekeeping. If you want to look at the next topics for the following weeks, they're already on Instagram. You can always follow Jen on her socials. And yeah.
So my Instagram is Jen Kahlo, GenKhlo. If you prefer to get in touch by email, my email is tarotwithgenesis@gmail.com. Remember, the magic within you makes the world a more beautiful place. Blessed be, and signing off.